In the stillness of ancient Rome, where the Tiber River whispered its secrets and the seven hills stood as silent witnesses, there was a world teeming with the breath of gods and spirits. Before the grandeur of the empire, before the legions marched and the marble temples rose, there was a belief, an unshakable faith in the unseen forces that shaped the world. These were the beginnings of Roman mythology, where every rustle of the leaves, every crack of thunder, was a voice from the divine. In the earliest days, the Romans looked to the world around them, feeling the presence of something greater in the natural elements that surrounded them. The earth beneath their feet, fertile and rich, was not just land, it was the very body of a goddess, nurturing and sustaining life. The sky above, vast and endless, was not merely a backdrop to their lives, it was the canvas of the gods, where they painted their wool with stars and storms. The people of Rome lived in harmony with these forces, believing that their fate was intertwined with the spirits that dwelled in every tree, every stream, every gust of wind. But Rome was never an island. As the young city grew, it found itself at the crossroads of cultures, each bringing with it new stories, new gods, new beliefs. The Romans, ever practical and wise, did not reject these foreign influences. Instead, they welcomed them, weaving them into the fabric of their own mythology. It was this openness, this willingness to embrace and blend, that gave Roman mythology its rich and varied tapestry. One of the most profound influences came from the Etruscans, a mysterious people who lived to the north of Rome. The Etruscans were a civilization steeped in ritual and religion, with gods that were both fearsome and revered. When the Romans encountered the Etruscan pantheon, they saw in these gods reflections of their own beliefs. The mighty god Tinia, who hurled thunderbolts from the heavens, became the Roman Jupiter, king of the gods, protector of the state. His wife, Juno, fierce and watchful, was transformed into Juno, the queen of the gods, guardian of women and marriage. The Etruscan influence was a powerful current, shaping Roman beliefs and practices in ways that would last for centuries. Yet, it was the Greeks who left the most indelible mark on Roman mythology. The Greeks, with their rich myths, their epic tales of heroes and gods, offered the Romans a wealth of stories that resonated with their own experiences and aspirations. The Romans found in the Greek gods reflections of their own values, honor, duty, power. They did not simply adopt these gods, they made them their own, merging them with their existing deities, creating a pantheon that was uniquely Roman. Zeus, the Greek king of the gods, became Jupiter, the protector of Rome, the bringer of justice. Hera, his queen, was transformed into Juno, ever vigilant, watching over the Roman people with a stern but loving eye. Aphrodite, the Greek goddess of love, was reborn as Venus, the mother of Rome, whose beauty and power were unmatched. Even Hermes, the swift-footed messenger of the gods, found a place in Roman mythology as Mercury, the god of commerce and communication, guiding traders and travelers with his cunning and wit. But the blending of Greek and Roman beliefs was more than just a merging of gods, it was a melding of stories, of myths that spoke to the deepest fears and desires of the human heart. The Romans took the Greek myths and breathed new life into them, infusing them with their own values, their own sense of destiny. The story of Hercules, the mighty hero who completed 12 impossible labors, became a tale of Roman strength and perseverance. The tragic love of Orpheus and Eurydice, who defied death itself, was retold as a story of Roman loyalty and devotion. These myths, born in the hills of Greece, found a new home in the heart of Rome, where they took root and flourished. Yet, even as they embraced these foreign gods and stories, the Romans never forgot their own roots. They honored the spirits of their ancestors, the protectors of their homes and families. These spirits, known as the Lares and Penates, were worshipped in every Roman household, their presence a comforting reminder that the past was always with them, guiding them, protecting them. The Romans believed that the spirit of Rome itself, the very soul of the city, was a living, breathing force, Vesta, the goddess of the hearth, whose eternal flame burned in the heart of the city, symbolizing the undying spirit of the Roman people. This complex web of beliefs, this rich tapestry of gods and spirits, formed the foundation of Roman mythology. It was a mythology that spoke not just to the power of the gods, but to the strength and resilience of the Roman people. It was a mythology that grew and evolved, absorbing new influences, yet always remaining true to its core, the belief that the gods were with them, watching over them, guiding them through the triumphs and trials of life. In the quiet moments, when the bustle of the city faded and the stars began to appear in the night sky, the Romans would look up and feel the presence of the gods. They would see Jupiter, king of the gods, and the brightest star, and know that they were protected. They would feel the gentle touch of Venus in the evening breeze, a reminder of the love and beauty that surrounded them. They would sense the power of Mars in the distant rumble of thunder, a warning that the gods were always near, watching, waiting. This was the world of Roman mythology, a world where the divine and the mortal were intertwined, where every moment was touched by the gods. It was a world that gave the Romans strength, that gave them hope, that gave them the courage to build an empire that would stand the test of time. Thunder roared across the sky, splitting the heavens with a force that made the earth tremble. This was not just any storm, it was the voice of Jupiter, the king of the gods, announcing his power to the world below. His presence was felt in every crack of lightning, and every rumble of thunder that shook the foundations of the world. The Romans believed that when Jupiter spoke, even the mightiest of men fell silent, for his was the voice of the sky, the ruler of all that existed. Born from the mighty god Saturn and the earth goddess Ops, Jupiter's destiny was written in the stars before he even took his first breath. But the path to power was not given to him, it had to be fought for, with fire in his heart and steel in his hand. Saturn, consumed by fear that one of his children would overthrow him, devoured each of them at birth. Yet fate had other plans for Jupiter. His mother, desperate to save him, hid him away in the shadows of Mount Ida, far from his father's sight. There, in secret, he grew stronger, biding his time until he was ready to reclaim his birthright. When the day came, it was not just a battle, it was a war that shook the very heavens. Jupiter rose with a fire in his eyes, gathering his siblings, whom he had freed from Saturn's belly. Together, they faced the Titans, ancient beings of unimaginable power who ruled before the gods. The battle raged across the cosmos, a war so fierce that the very stars seemed to flicker with fear. With thunderbolts forged by the Cyclopes, Jupiter struck down the Titans one by one, his fury unmatched, his strength unparalleled. When the dust finally settled, Jupiter stood victorious, the Titans imprisoned in the depths of Tartarus, their reign at an end. But even in victory, Jupiter knew that the crown was not his alone to wear. He divided the world among his brothers, Neptune and Pluto, each taking a realm to rule. Neptune claimed the sea, with its endless waves and dark depths, while Pluto took the underworld, the shadowy domain of the dead. And Jupiter, he took the sky, the highest of all realms, where he watched over both gods and men. From his throne atop Mount Olympus, he ruled with a firm but just hand, his power felt in every corner of the earth. Yet being king was not without its burdens. Jupiter's reign was marked by more than just battles and power, it was defined by his relationships with the other gods, each one complex and fraught with tension. His wife, Juno, was both his greatest ally and his fiercest adversary. As the queen of the gods, she stood by his side, her strength and wisdom unmatched. But she was also the protector of marriage, and Jupiter's wandering eye often led to storms not of thunder but of jealousy and rage. Their relationship was one of love and conflict, a dance of power that could shake even the gods. And then there were the other gods, each with their own desires, their own ambitions. Mars, the god of war, burned with a fire that sometimes threatened to consume him. His hunger for battle, for bloodshed, often clashed with Jupiter's vision of order and balance. But Jupiter knew the value of Mars' strength, even as he kept a watchful eye on the god's ever-burning flame. Venus, the goddess of love, was another force to be reckoned with. Her beauty could sway even the most hardened hearts, and Jupiter was not immune to her charms. But he also saw the chaos that love could bring, the way it could turn the world upside down in a heartbeat. Yet through it all, Jupiter remained the center, the anchor of the Roman pantheon. His power was not just in his thunderbolts, but in his wisdom, in his ability to see beyond the moment, to understand the delicate balance of the world. He was the god who held the scales of justice, who ensured that the world did not fall into chaos. His gaze was far-reaching, his decisions not made lightly. For while he ruled with strength, he also ruled with fairness, understanding that true power was not in crushing those beneath him, but in lifting them up and guiding them toward a better future. And so, when the skies darkened, when the winds howled and the earth trembled, the Romans looked up to the heavens and knew that Jupiter was watching. They believed that in his hands lay their fate, that his will could change the course of history. He was more than a god, he was a force of nature, a protector, a ruler who shaped the world with every breath. Juno's gaze was fierce, unwavering, as she stood watch over the city she loved. Rome was more than a place, it was her heartbeat, her soul. She was the protector of its people, the queen who shielded the state with all the strength of a goddess and the fierce loyalty of a mother. Every stone, every breath of wind that whispered through its streets, felt like a part of her. She would fight for Rome with everything she had, just as she fought for the sanctity of marriage and the sacred bond of childbirth. Her power was not in the thunderbolts of her husband, Jupiter, but in her quiet, relentless strength. Juno held within her the essence of womanhood, the giver of life, the protector of the family, and the fierce warrior when her children were threatened. Her love for Rome was as powerful as the love she had for those who sought her protection. But love, for Juno, was never simple. Jupiter, her husband and the king of the gods, was the most complex part of her heart. Their love was like the tempest, raging with passion, loyalty, and betrayal. Juno stood as his equal in power, but her heart often burned with the pain of his unfaithfulness. Yet, she remained steadfast, her duty to Rome and the people far outweighing her personal sorrow. Each betrayal was a dagger, but Juno was no fragile flower, she was a goddess forged in the fires of loyalty and rage. Her resolve only grew stronger, her love for her city and her people, unshakable. Juno's protectiveness extended beyond the temple walls, beyond the borders of Rome. She watched over every woman who called upon her in the throes of childbirth, every bride who whispered her name before crossing the threshold into a new life. In those sacred moments, Juno's presence was felt, an unseen hand guiding, protecting, ensuring that the bonds of family and life remained strong. And when Rome itself trembled under the threat of war, it was Juno who inspired courage in the hearts of its people, who stood as their shield when the world seemed on the brink of collapse. But her love for Rome was not a soft, gentle love. It was fierce, like a lioness defending her cubs. Juno was a warrior at heart, and her protection often came with a price. She demanded respect, loyalty, and devotion from those she guarded, and she was unyielding in her expectations. When Rome stood strong, so did she. But when its people faltered, when they forgot the sacred vows they had made to her, Juno's wrath was like a storm that could not be tamed. Her punishments were not out of cruelty but out of a deep, burning need to protect what she loved. She would not allow Rome to fall, not while she had the power to stop it. And through it all, her complex relationship with Jupiter wove itself into the fabric of her existence. Juno loved him deeply, even when her heart ached with the weight of his infidelities. She was his queen, standing beside him through the wars, the triumphs, and the tragedies of the gods. But Juno was not a silent partner. She was a force of her own, commanding respect from all who crossed her path. When she confronted Jupiter, her words were sharp as blades, her eyes burning with the fire of a goddess who would not be pushed aside. Their love was a battlefield, marked by moments of passion and fury. Yet, despite the storms that raged between them, Juno remained by Jupiter's side. She was his equal, his counterpart, the goddess who balanced his thunder with her quiet strength. Even in their darkest moments, there was a bond between them that could not be broken, a bond forged in the fires of creation, in the power that flowed through their veins as rulers of the gods. Juno's story was one of strength, sacrifice, and an unyielding love that transcended the mortal realm. She was the queen who stood guard over her people, the goddess who fought for every child born under her protection. She was fierce, unrelenting, and in her heart burned a love for Rome that would never fade. The ocean roared with a power that could swallow the world whole. Beneath the surface, where light struggled to reach, Neptune ruled with an iron grip. His voice was the crashing waves, his breath the whirlpools that dragged ships into the abyss. Every creature of the sea bowed to his command, from the smallest fish to the monstrous beasts lurking in the deepest shadows. Neptune, god of the sea, was a force that could not be tamed, his power as endless and unpredictable as the waters he ruled. He stood tall, trident in hand, his eyes reflecting the fury of the storm above. With a single gesture, he could summon winds that ripped sails apart or calm the fiercest tempest with a whisper. The sea was his kingdom, and no one, mortal or god, could challenge his dominion. Sailors who ventured too far from shore prayed to Neptune for safe passage, knowing that their fate rested in his hands. A single whim could mean the difference between a calm journey and a watery grave. Neptune's connection to the ocean was more than just control, it was a bond that ran deep through his very being. He was the spirit of the waters, the life force that surged through every wave and current. The creatures of the sea were his children, each one crafted by his hand, from the graceful dolphins that danced in the sunlight to the terrifying sea serpents that prowled the darkest depths. Even the majestic horses, who galloped on land, were believed to have been born of the sea, shaped by Neptune's will. Their powerful bodies and untamed spirit were a reflection of the god who created them, wild and free like the ocean itself. But Neptune's temper was as fierce as the storms he controlled. When angered, he could unleash his wrath upon the world in a way that no one could escape. The winds would howl, the sea would rise, and ships would be tossed like toys in a child's hands. Sailors whispered stories of Neptune's vengeance, of how entire fleets had disappeared without a trace, swallowed by the angry waters. And yet, for all his fury, Neptune was not without mercy. He could be as gentle as the lapping waves on a quiet shore, guiding lost sailors to safety when his heart was softened by their prayers. One of the most feared creatures in Neptune's domain was the mighty Kraken, a sea monster of unimaginable size and strength. Its tentacles could wrap around a ship and drag it beneath the waves in a matter of moments, leaving nothing but silence in its wake. Legends told of Neptune summoning the Kraken to punish those who dared to disrespect the ocean, unleashing the beast to remind mortals of the power that lay beneath the surface. But the Kraken was not the only terror that lurked in the depths. Sea serpents, with their long, sinuous bodies and razor-sharp teeth, slithered through the water, waiting to strike at anything that crossed their path. These monsters were Neptune's creatures, and they answered to no one but him. Yet, for all the dangers, the sea was also a place of wonder and beauty. The sun setting over the horizon, casting a golden light across the water, was a sight that could take one's breath away. The gentle sway of the waves, the rhythm of the tides, they were all part of Neptune's design, a reminder that the ocean, like the god who ruled it, was a balance of calm and chaos, beauty and terror. Neptune's power extended beyond the physical realm of the ocean. He was also the god of all water, from the smallest stream to the mighty rivers that carved their way through the land. The rivers that gave life to crops, the springs that quenched thirst, all were under Neptune's watchful eye. His reach was far and wide, touching every corner of the earth with the life-giving force of water. And in those moments when the rains came, filling rivers and lakes, it was Neptune's blessing, a gift to the world from the god who held the power of water in his hands. Through it all, Neptune remained a figure of awe and reverence. His power was undeniable, his presence felt in every wave that touched the shore. Mortals prayed to him, offering sacrifices in hopes of gaining his favor. For to earn Neptune's favor was to be granted safe passage across the treacherous waters of life. But to incur his wrath was to risk everything. Her beauty could make even the stars blush. Venus, the goddess of love, radiated an allure that no one, mortal or divine, could resist. The soft curve of her smile held the promise of passion, her gaze a caress that lingered long after she had turned away. Wherever Venus walked, love bloomed in her wake, like flowers opening their petals to the sun. She was love itself, irresistible and overwhelming, a force that could bring joy or tear the soul apart. But Venus was more than just a goddess of beauty. She held a power that could bind hearts and ignite desires, a power that reached into the depths of the human spirit. Lovers would look to her with desperate prayers, hoping for her blessing, for Venus had the ability to create connections that could withstand the weight of the world. And yet, she was also a goddess of heartbreak, for love was never simple, and even Venus could not control the way it twisted and turned. The most famous of Venus's affairs was with Mars, the god of war. Their passion was a flame that burned through the heavens, fierce and consuming. Mars, with his battle-hardened exterior, found himself powerless before Venus's charm. In her presence, his armor seemed to melt away, leaving only a man captivated by a love that was as dangerous as it was beautiful. Their love was a secret whispered among the gods, a scandal that left even the mighty Jupiter shaking his head. For Venus and Mars, love and war were two sides of the same coin, a dance of fire and fury that neither could resist. Their affair was not without consequence. Venus's husband, Vulcan, the god of fire and forge, was no fool. He watched as his wife slipped away to meet Mars in the shadows, his heart filled with anger and pain. With a cunning that matched his skill in crafting, Vulcan set a trap. He forged an unbreakable net, fine as silk yet stronger than iron, and with it, he caught Venus and Mars in the midst of their passion. The gods laughed as Vulcan displayed his unfaithful wife and her lover, but beneath their amusement lay a warning. Even the goddess of love was not immune to the consequences of her actions. Yet, despite the scandal, Venus's power never wavered. She continued to weave love and desire into the fabric of the world, her influence touching the lives of both gods and mortals alike. Kings and warriors, peasants and poets, all fell under her spell, each one hoping to taste even a fraction of the love that Venus embodied. Her beauty was eternal, her grace unmatched, and her presence a reminder that love, for all its complications, was the most powerful force of all. Venus's love was not always gentle, however. When angered, her wrath could be as fierce as Mars's rage. She was protective of those she favored, and woe to anyone who dared harm them. When Aeneas, her mortal son, faced danger, Venus did not hesitate to intervene. She guided him through the perils of war, ensuring his survival, for the love of a mother is as fierce as any battle, and Venus would not see her son fall. It was through her guidance that Aeneas would go on to become a great hero, his destiny intertwined with the will of the goddess who loved him beyond measure. Yet, for all her divine power, Venus understood the fragility of love. She saw it in the fleeting moments of tenderness between mortals, in the way a glance could hold a world of meaning, in the touch of a hand that spoke of promises unspoken. Love was a delicate thing, easily broken, but always worth the risk. And so, Venus continued to stir hearts, to bring people together in moments of passion and longing, knowing that even in its most painful moments, love was what made life worth living. Venus's presence was everywhere, in the bloom of a rose, the softness of a lover's whisper, the warmth of a kiss shared under the stars. She was in the laughter of those who found joy in each other's arms, and in the tears of those who longed for love lost. For Venus, love was not just a gift, it was life itself, the very essence of existence. And so, she continued her work, shaping the world through the power of love, a force that could never be fully understood, but always felt. Venus, with her radiant beauty and boundless charm, remained a goddess to be adored and feared in equal measure. Her influence stretched across the heavens and the earth, leaving no one untouched by the power of love. And though the stories of her affairs and her passions were whispered in the halls of Olympus, there were also some in the hearts of those who believed in the magic of love. For as long as there was love in the world, Venus would always reign as the goddess who made it all possible. The clang of swords echoed in the distance, a sound that stirred something primal in the heart. Mars, the god of war, stood tall and fierce, his presence a force that commanded both fear and respect. Every Roman soldier felt his gaze upon them as they marched into battle, their hearts filled with a burning fire that only Mars could ignite. He was more than just a god, he was the embodiment of the battlefield itself, the blood, the sweat, the cries of victory, and the agony of defeat. Mars's warlike nature pulsed through every corner of Rome, a city that revered him as its protector. He was the god who blessed their soldiers, who stood beside them as they fought to defend their land. And every sword raised in battle, and every shield held firm against the onslaught of the enemy, Mars's power could be felt. His very name inspired courage in those who sought to uphold the honor of Rome, knowing that the god of war watched over them. But Mars was not just a god of mindless violence. His love for battle was fierce, yes, but there was purpose behind it. He fought to protect, to defend, to ensure that Rome would never fall. His strength was a shield for the city, a promise that he would never let it crumble. When the foundations of Rome were threatened, Mars was the one who stood firm, his hand guiding the weapons of those who fought in his name. Mars's heart, however, was not only hardened by war. It softened for Venus, the goddess of love, in a love affair that was as passionate as it was forbidden. Their love was an unlikely pairing, battle and beauty, strife and affection, but it was undeniable. Mars, the fierce warrior, was captivated by Venus's grace, her charm, her ability to make even a god of war forget the heat of the battlefield, if only for a moment. Their love burned bright, a flame that could not be extinguished, even in the face of divine scandal. Yet Mars's love for Venus was not a gentle affair. It was wild and untamed, a love that matched the intensity of the battlefield. He would sweep her off her feet with the same ferocity he brought to battle, and Venus would find herself surrendering to the storm that was Mars. Their love was a force of nature, as unstoppable as the tides of war that Mars commanded. But even the gods were not immune to jealousy, and Vulcan, Venus's husband, would not stand idly by. Mars and Venus's love was exposed, their secret stolen away, but the bond between the god of war and the goddess of love remained unbroken. Mars's connection to Rome ran even deeper than his role as its protector. The myths of Rome's founding were intertwined with his legacy, and he was revered not only as a god of war but as a father of the city itself. His sons, Romulus and Remus, were born of Mars's bloodline, and their story was the story of Rome. It was Mars's strength that flowed through their veins as they set out to build a city that would stand the test of time. But as with all things tied to Mars, their tale was marked by conflict. Romulus and Remus, bound by blood yet divided by ambition, would clash in a fateful battle that would end with Romulus standing as the first king of Rome, with Mars watching over his son's triumph and tragedy. Mars's influence stretched far beyond the battlefield. He was the god who watched over the crops, ensuring that the land was fertile and that the people of Rome would not go hungry. He was worshipped not only by soldiers but by farmers, who knew that Mars's favor was as essential to their survival as the rain that nourished the earth. In his dual role as a god of war and fertility, Mars was a paradox, both a destroyer and a creator, a force of chaos and a protector of life. As the centuries passed, Mars's name continued to echo in the hearts of those who called Rome their home. His statues stood tall in the city, reminders of the god who had fought for them, who had loved them, who had given them strength in their darkest moments. Roman soldiers would pray to Mars before battle, seeking his blessing, knowing that with his favor, they could not fail. And when the battle was over, when the blood had dried and the cries of war had faded, they would give thanks to Mars, for it was his hand that had guided them to victory. Mars was a god who understood the cost of battle. He knew that war was not without pain, that every victory came with a price. But for Mars, that price was worth paying, for the glory of Rome was worth any sacrifice. His heart beat with the rhythm of war, but it also beat with love, for Venus, for Rome, for the city that would rise and fall, but never be forgotten. Mars, the god of war, stood as a reminder that battle was not just about bloodshed. It was about protection, about strength, about the courage to face the enemy and fight for what was right. And though Mars would always be a god of war, he would also be remembered as a god of loyalty, of passion, of a love so fierce that not even the gods could contain it. Apollo and Diana were born under the light of the same stars, yet their paths were as different as night and day. From the moment of their birth, the world felt their presence, two divine twins who held the power of both life and death in their hands. Apollo, with his golden radiance, brought music, prophecy, and healing to the world. Diana, with her silver glow, roamed the wild forests, her arrows sharp and her spirit untamed. Together, they represented a balance that the world desperately needed, a harmony between nature and civilization, between the light of the sun and the mystery of the moon. Apollo's voice was said to be as sweet as the melodies of his lyre. When he played, the world seemed to stop and listen, as though the very air held its breath, captivated by the beauty of his music. He was the god who could soothe the wounded heart, whose songs could heal both body and soul. But Apollo was more than just a god of music. He could see what others could not, visions of the future that flowed through him like a river, unstoppable and powerful. People would come to him, seeking answers, desperate to know what fate had in store for them. And Apollo, with his piercing gaze, would tell them truths they were not always ready to hear. Yet, for all his brightness, Apollo was not a god to be taken lightly. His wrath was as fierce as his music was beautiful. When he was angered, the same hands that healed could strike with a force that left devastation in their wake. Arrows of plague flew from his bow, swift and deadly, as a reminder that even the god of light had shadows within him. The duality of Apollo's nature, healer and destroyer, creator and avenger, was a force that could not be ignored. Diana, his twin, was no less powerful, though her strength lay in a different realm. Where Apollo's light shone in the cities and temples, Diana's influence was felt in the wild places, where the trees grew tall and the rivers ran free. She was the huntress, her bow always ready, her arrows true. Her love for the wilderness was fierce, and she guarded it with a protectiveness that bordered on ferocity. The animals of the forest were her companions, the moon her constant guide. She was the goddess who knew no fear, who walked alone in the darkest woods and found comfort in the quiet of nature. Diana's heart was as wild as the forest she loved. She valued her freedom above all else, refusing to be bound by the expectations of others. She did not seek out love, nor did she long for the company of others. Her heart was her own, and she guarded it with the same care she gave to the creatures of the wild. But Diana was not without compassion. She would hear the cries of those in need, and though she was distant, she was not indifferent. Her arrows would fly to protect the innocent, and her presence would be felt by those who needed her, even if they never saw her face. The bond between Apollo and Diana was unbreakable. Though their paths were different, they were always connected. Apollo's sun would rise, and Diana's moon would follow, each one taking its turn in the sky. They balanced each other in a way that no one else could. When Apollo's fire burned too bright, Diana's cool presence would temper him. When Diana's solitude threatened to overwhelm her, Apollo's warmth would remind her that she was never truly alone. Together, they were a force of nature. Their power touched every corner of the world, from the cities where Apollo's temples stood tall to the forests where Diana's shrines were hidden among the trees. Mortals would pray to Apollo for healing, for prophecy, for the strength to carry on. They would turn to Diana when they needed protection, when they sought guidance in the wild places of the world. The divine twins, though separate, were always intertwined, their fates forever linked. But even the gods were not immune to tragedy. Apollo, with all his power, could not save the ones he loved from the cruel hand of fate. His heart broke when his beloved Daphne was turned into a laurel tree to escape him, and though he adorned himself with her leaves, the loss lingered in his soul. Diana, too, knew sorrow. When her beloved companion, Orion, was taken from her, she placed him in the stars, where she could always see him. Yet the ache of his absence never truly left her. Apollo and Diana stood as reminders of the complexities of life, of the beauty and the pain, the light and the darkness. They were gods who understood that life was not simple, that every joy was tinged with sorrow, and every sorrow had its moments of light. Their influence over both nature and civilization was a testament to this duality. They were gods who held the power to create and to destroy, to heal and to harm, and they did so with a grace that only the divine could possess. As long as the sun rises and the moon follows, Apollo and Diana will be remembered. Their stories are etched into the fabric of the world, a reminder that even the gods are not immune to the complexities of existence. They are the divine twins, forever linked by the stars under which they were born, forever guiding the world with their light and their shadow. Swift as the wind, Mercury moved between the worlds with a grace that no other god could match. His sandals, adorned with wings, lifted him effortlessly into the sky, where he carried messages from the gods above to those below. His presence was a blur, a flash of motion that left only a whisper in its wake. Mortals would feel the air shift and know that Mercury had passed through, unseen yet ever present. He was the guide, the connector, the one who could move between realms as easily as one breathes. And in his movement, there was power, both in what he brought and what he could take away. Mercury was more than just a messenger. He was the embodiment of cleverness, a god whose mind was as quick as his feet. No lock could hold him, no puzzle could stump him. When the gods needed someone to think on their feet, to find a solution when all seemed lost, they turned to Mercury. He could talk his way out of anything, his words as slippery as they were persuasive. Whether dealing with mortals or gods, he knew exactly what to say to get what he wanted. He was a god of commerce, of trade, of exchange. But more than that, he was a god of cunning, a trickster who could twist reality with nothing more than a smile. Mortals feared and respected him in equal measure. They would pray to him for luck in their dealings, hoping that his favor would turn their fortunes. But they knew, too, that Mercury could be capricious. His aid was never guaranteed, and those who thought they could outwit him soon found themselves tangled in their own schemes. For Mercury was not a god to be crossed. He saw all, knew all, and his sharp mind missed nothing. One moment, he was your ally, the next, your undoing. Such was the nature of the god who danced between worlds, never fully belonging to one or the other. Mercury's ability to move between realms made him unique among the gods. Where others were bound to Olympus or the underworld, Mercury traveled freely. He guided souls from the land of the living to the land of the dead, his presence a comfort to those who feared the journey ahead. He would appear at their side, his presence light and almost playful, and lead them through the shadows to their final destination. The underworld was not a place of dread when Mercury was near. He brought a lightness to even the darkest places, a reminder that no realm was beyond his reach. But Mercury's role as a guide was not limited to the dead. He moved between gods and mortals with the same ease, his feet barely touching the ground as he carried out his tasks. He was the link between worlds, the one who kept the lines of communication open. The gods relied on him to keep their words flowing, to ensure that nothing was lost in the vast expanse between heaven and earth. And Mercury never failed them. He was tireless, relentless in his duty, and though his mischievous nature often led him astray, when it came to his role as messenger, he was unmatched. Mercury's relationship with the other gods was complex. He was not as powerful as Jupiter, nor as feared as Mars, but he was indispensable. They needed him, whether they liked it or not. His ability to move between worlds meant that he knew things others did not, and his sharp mind made him a valuable ally, or a dangerous enemy. The gods were wary of Mercury's wit, knowing that beneath his playful exterior lay a mind that was always calculating, always one step ahead. He could charm them with a laugh, then turn around and outmaneuver them in the blink of an eye. Yet for all his cunning, Mercury was loyal to the gods, carrying out their wishes with a dedication that never wavered. One of Mercury's most famous tales is that of his theft of Apollo's cattle. Barely a day old, the infant god managed to steal the cattle and hide his tracks so well that even Apollo, with all his divine sight, could not find them. When confronted, Mercury played innocent, his childlike face masking the sharp intelligence that had orchestrated the entire heist. It was only through Zeus's intervention that the truth came out, and even then, Mercury's charm won him forgiveness. Instead of punishment, he was granted his role as the messenger of the gods, a position that allowed him to continue using his wit and speed to serve the divine in his own unique way. For all his trickery, Mercury had a lightness about him that made him beloved by many. He brought laughter to the gods, a sense of playfulness that was often lacking in their serious world. His presence was a reminder that even in the midst of divine conflicts, there was room for joy, for mischief, for the unexpected. And though his tricks could sometimes cause chaos, they also brought balance. In a world of rigid rules and order, Mercury was the spark of unpredictability that kept things from becoming too stagnant. He was the wind that blew through the heavens, stirring up trouble but also keeping the air fresh. Mercury's influence was felt everywhere, from the bustling marketplaces of Rome to the quiet, shadowy paths of the underworld. He was the god who touched every corner of existence, whose swift feet left their mark on all things. And though he may not have been as grand as some of the other gods, his presence was one that could not be ignored. The fire in the heart of Rome never went out. It burned bright and constant, a living flame that was more than just heat and light, it was life itself. This sacred fire, which flickered and danced in the temple of Vesta, was the pulse of the city, the heartbeat of a civilization. And watching over it, day and night, were the Vestal virgins, bound by their duty to keep it alive. To let the fire die was unthinkable, a tragedy that could bring ruin upon Rome itself. Vesta, the goddess of the hearth and home, watched over them all, silent and steadfast, as eternal as the flame she guarded. Vesta wasn't a goddess of grand gestures or violent storms. She didn't command armies or hurl thunderbolts from the sky. Her power was quiet, steady, and unyielding. In every home, in every corner of the city, she was there, in the warmth of the hearth, and the safety of the walls that sheltered families from the cold outside. Vesta's presence was felt in the simple acts of daily life, the lighting of a fire, the sharing of a meal, the gathering of loved ones. She was the guardian of the home, the protector of peace, and the keeper of the flame that symbolized Rome's strength. The Vestal virgins, chosen as children and sworn to 30 years of service, were Vesta's living embodiment. Clad in white robes, their faces calm and serene, they moved through the temple with quiet grace. Their lives were dedicated to the goddess and to Rome, their purity a reflection of the sacred flame they tended. They were more than just priestesses, they were symbols of Rome's purity and stability. As long as the Vestals kept the fire burning, Rome would stand strong. But their task was not without its burdens. The weight of the city's fate rested on their shoulders, and any failure would bring disaster not just upon themselves, but upon all of Rome. Yet, in their eyes, there was no fear, only devotion. The flame was their life, their purpose, and they nurtured it with a love that transcended all else. They knew that as long as the fire burned, Rome would be safe. It was a delicate balance, one that required constant vigilance and care. But the Vestals were unwavering. Their hands, though gentle, held the power to keep the world from falling into darkness. And in that fire, in the flickering light of the sacred flame, they found strength, a connection to something greater than themselves. Vesta's influence was everywhere. She was in the warmth of the hearth, in the gentle crackle of a fire on a cold night, in the light that kept the darkness at bay. She was the unseen force that held everything together, the quiet strength that ensured Rome's survival. There were no grand temples dedicated to her, no statues carved in her likeness. But she didn't need them. Her presence was in every home, every hearth, every fire that burned across the city. The people of Rome knew her not through towering monuments, but through the warmth that greeted them at the end of a long day, the light that guided them through the night. Vesta was also the protector of the home, the one who ensured that families were safe within their walls. In a world full of chaos and uncertainty, she was the constant, the unchanging force that held everything together. The hearth was her domain, the place where families gathered, where stories were told, where life happened. And in every flicker of the flame, Vesta was there, watching, protecting, ensuring that the world outside could never penetrate the warmth of the home. The Vestal virgins, in their service to Vesta, became the embodiment of her power. They were the keepers of the flame, the ones who ensured that Rome's heart never stopped beating. Their purity was more than just a physical state, it was a reflection of Rome's own purity, its strength, its unity. The Vestals were revered, honored, and feared all at once. They were the bridge between the mortal world and the divine, the ones who ensured that the connection between Rome and the gods remained strong. But their service came at a cost. 30 years of their lives were dedicated to Vesta, years in which they could not marry, could not have families of their own. They were bound to the goddess, to the flame, and to Rome. And yet, for the Vestals, there was no regret. They saw their duty as a privilege, a sacred honor that few were chosen to bear. They understood the weight of their task, the importance of the flame they tended. And they embraced it, finding strength in their devotion, and the knowledge that they were the guardians of Rome's very soul. In every fire that burned across the city, Vesta's presence was felt. She was the warmth in the cold, the light in the darkness, the protector of the hearth and home. And through the Vestal virgins, her power was made manifest, a living flame that kept Rome alive. Beneath the world of the living, in the shadowed depths where sunlight never reaches, lies the realm of Pluto. The air is heavy with silence, and the walls seem to pulse with ancient, unspoken power. Here, among the quiet whispers of forgotten souls, Pluto reigns as the mysterious and feared god of the underworld. His gaze is cold and unwavering, his presence immense. Every breath in this land feels like a concession, a reminder of the thin line between life and death, a line that Pluto controls with ease. Pluto is not a god of chaos or wrath. He does not seek out destruction or revel in suffering. Instead, he is patient, a figure of inevitability. Death is not something to be feared under his rule, it is simply the end of one journey and the beginning of another. Yet, for the living, the thought of his domain brings chills. The underworld is not a place they wish to visit, even though they know it is where they will all eventually go. Pluto's connection to death makes him both feared and respected, a god who must be honored, though few dare to speak his name too loudly. But Pluto's kingdom is not just a place of shadows and ghosts. It is also a place of riches beyond imagination. The ground trembles with the weight of the precious metals buried deep within it, treasures that belong to Pluto alone. Gold, silver, gems, all of these are part of his domain, and they glitter in the dark like stars in a midnight sky. His connection to wealth is as strong as his bond with death, and in the same way that death is inevitable, so too is the allure of riches. The world above may celebrate Jupiter's rule in the sky, but it is Pluto who guards the treasures of the earth, the hidden fortunes that draw men to dig deep into the ground, driven by greed and desperation. The souls that pass through Pluto's domain are many, their lives on Earth now nothing but distant memories. Some find peace in his kingdom, while others wander, unable to accept their fate. Yet Pluto is not cruel to them. He offers no torment, only silence, only rest. The weight of life's struggles falls away in the underworld, and though it is a place of darkness, there is a certain comfort in knowing that it is the final stop, the place where all burdens are laid to rest. For those who understand this, Pluto is not a god to fear, but one to trust with their final journey. In his palace of black stone, Pluto sits upon his throne, his eyes gazing into the endless expanse of his realm. His power is absolute here, and even the other gods tread carefully in his domain. They know that while they may command the heavens, the seas, and the earth, Pluto rules over something far more permanent. Time cannot touch him, and in his quiet, steady way, he holds dominion over all who live, for in the end, they all belong to him. Yet even a god as powerful as Pluto does not rule alone. By his side is Persephone, the queen of the underworld, whose presence brings both light and darkness to his world. Her time is split between the living world above and the shadowed realm below, and when she is with Pluto, the underworld feels less cold, less empty. Her touch softens the edges of his kingdom, adding a strange, ethereal beauty to the land of the dead. Together, they form a balance, life and death, warmth and cold, light and shadow. Pluto's power is not just in the underworld, it is in the very fabric of existence. He represents the inevitable end, the cycle of life that cannot be broken. In his hands, death is not a punishment but a passage, and though the living fear him, they also understand that he is necessary. Without death, life would have no meaning. Without the underworld, there would be no peace for the souls of the dead. Pluto's rule is one of quiet strength, and his presence is a reminder that everything, no matter how bright or powerful, must come to an end. In the quiet depths of his realm, Pluto listens to the echoes of the world above. He hears the cries of the dying, the final breaths of the old, the first gasps of the newly dead as they cross into his kingdom. He watches them arrive, their souls weary from their journey, and he welcomes them with the stillness of the earth. There is no grandeur in his greeting, no fanfare, only the endless, patient embrace of the underworld. And as the living move on, continuing their lives above, Pluto remains, constant, unchanging, the silent ruler of the world that lies beneath.